Hello, and welcome to the Unhinged Binge, a podcast wherein I, a coffee addicted nerd, talk about cinema. I'm your host, Legault. I'm very sorry, I do not offer any refunds. Perhaps I should, perhaps I shouldn't. I don't know. You tell me later. Okay, so this year I have dedicated each month to watching horror movies from each year of the 1980s. I don't know if that made any sense. So, January, I'm watching films from 1980, February 1981, March 1982, so on and so forth, with a little extra wiggle room because, sometimes life gets in the way. All right, so to be very, very clear, this episode I'm specifically talking about the singular year between 1979 and 1981, 1980. So this is not going to be covering all of the decade of 1980 because you know what? There are a lot of horror movies and we'd be here forever. I'd lose my voice. I'm already losing it. It'd be a problem. So, with that having been said, thus far in the year of 1980, I've seen 36 horror movies and I have 5 left on my to watch list because they just weren't available on any streaming services I have, and I'm cheap. So I'm going based on Letterboxd's release dates just for organizational sake, and I have a list on Letterbox just again for organizational sake. All the information that I've cited, I decided to use from Letterboxd, and if there's anything that I know to be like incorrect or what have you, I'll note it as I'm going forward. So, all years, directors, all that stuff, my citation is just Letterboxd. The reviews are my own. I won't be spoiling anything unless very specifically stated. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through the 36 films. I got a lot of them from just having watched a lot of 80s horror movies. That is just my vibe. I tried to watch all of the movies that were mentioned in Search of Darkness. However, there was one I wasn't able to watch. He Knows You're Alone. I think I have 4 other movies. So I'm on my to watch list. I have He Knows You're Alone, Night of the Demon, Don't Answer the Phone, The Island, and Encounters of the Spooky Kind are the 5 movies I still need to watch from this year. I wanted to watch the highest rated movie and the lowest rated movie, again on Letterboxd. And then other than that, it's just movies that I've seen or movies that I thought had cool titles. If there's anything you want to recommend, oh my gosh, please do. Always looking for more. All right, so let's just go ahead and dive on in. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the highest rated movie of 1980. Well, I'm sorry, highest rated horror movie of 1980, which is The Shining. Could it be anything else? It's directed by Stanley Kubrick, based on the novel by Stephen King, although, through the grapevine, everyone kind of colloquially knows that, like, Stephen King famously didn't particularly like it. If you're a fan of the novel, I could definitely see the problems that he had, and I think they're very valid. I personally maintain that Mike Flanagan's House on Haunted Hill is actually the best adaptation of The Shining, which is so funny because he went on to make the sequel, Doctor Sleep, so clearly he was pitching it a long time. The film is starring Shelley Duvall, who did such a great job as Wendy, and she doesn't get the credit she deserves for all the abuse and just nonsense she put up with. Of course, Jack Nicholson, who's just creepy throughout the entire film, Danny Lloyd's little boy, and Scatman Crothers, which might be the coolest name ever. The location is the Overlook Hotel. The tagline reads, "He came as the caretaker, but his hotel had its own guardians who'd been there a long time." Am I going to do the voice every time I read a tagline? Maybe. Who knows? Who can say? The subgenre is just a little thing I like to add in. It's a haunted house winter isolation tale. I mean, I really don't need to sell you on The Shining. Obviously, it's a recommend. I've had the opportunity to see it in the theaters 3 times. I absolutely love this film. Is it perfect? No. Is it great? Yes. It's Atmosphere the movie, right? And then I'm gonna go ahead and say the lowest rated film of 1980. However, a lot of websites cited it as coming out in 1979. So, question mark on that. Is called The Day Time Ended. It's directed by John Bud Cardos, who also directed Night Shadows, aka Mutant, which I love. It's another 80s horror movie. Would recommend that. It was edited by Ted Nicolau. So as soon as I saw that, I'm like, okay, this is definitely going to be produced by Charles Band. And yes, it was. So that tracks. Ted Nicolau, if you don't know, directed those like subspecies full moon movies. And I believe he did TerrorVision as well. All movies I recommend. I love Ted Nicolau. It's kind of an alien time travel movie. His tagline reads, "Their lives became a living hell when past, present, and future collided." It's, trying to do a lot technologically speaking with like claymation and I don't know. They're kind of like overlaying a lot of lights and coloring when they maybe could have just used lighting. Like they were trying to do more with their budget and technology than I think was available to them. And if they just did in camera tricks, I think it would have looked a lot better. Then they also had these, I guess you could say, like, I guess they're aliens, alien battles, but it looked like discount Ray Harryhausen, stuff. It just wasn't very good. I I don't know. I mean, it's a movie about a group of, what would you call them? Like preppers, like a family of preppers, and they get trapped in a time warpy alien battle thing. I think it's fun enough, actually. Like, I don't think that should have been the lowest rated movie. There's certainly movies on this list I would rate lower. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to what I consider to be the most influential film from 1980, which is Friday the 13th. Oh my God. Directed by Sean S. Cunningham, produced by Cunningham and Steve Miner, starring a lot of non-teens playing teens, including an introduction of one Kevin Bacon. The special effects were Tom Savini, so the film is great because Tom Savini's a legend. The music was by Harry Manfredini, and oh my gosh, that track rocks, especially when you get to like the third one when they have the disco remix. Oh my God, I can't wait to talk about that. It was distributed by Paramount, and that's actually really important because it was one of the if no, it was the first slasher movie to be picked up by a major studio. So it got one of the widest releases early on of a slasher film. And why that is important is because this movie was so well seen and made a lot of money. It's famously, and if you watch any interview with the creators of this movie, they'll tell you they were ripping off Halloween. It's obvious they were ripping off Halloween, but I think this movie, more so than Halloween, was the reason we have the rules, like sex equals death, drinking equals death, all that stuff. Sure, that stuff that can be kind of seen in Halloween, but it is explicit in the reason people are getting killed in Friday the 13th, which I think is really interesting because it doesn't get the credit for doing that. Halloween may have suggested some things, but Friday the 13th cemented them. It's a good for her camp slasher film. The tagline reads, "They were warned, they were doomed, and on Friday the 13th, nothing will save them." I forgot how to read for a minute. I mean, absolutely. Friday the 13th, couldn't recommend it more. If you want to talk about 80s horror movies, you cannot talk about them without talking about Friday the 13th. They had a sequel almost every single year that decade. That's so impressive. Shout out to them. I mean, way to go, Paramount. You made a great decision. All right, now we can move on to the Scream Queen herself. Speaking of Halloween, Jamie Lee Curtis. This girl was in 3 movies this year: The Fog, Prime Night, and Terror Train. We'll start with the John Carpenter and Jamie Lee Curtis team up again for The Fog. It was directed and composed, of course, by John Carpenter. It was written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill. Deborah Hill does not get enough, you know, praise and attention for what she contributed to John Carpenter's work. Just a legend, really. The makeup was by Rob Bottin, who is famous for doing makeup for The Thing. He's a very impressive young man. Dean Cundy did the cinematography. Tommy Lee Wallace was involved in this. It's starring Jamie Lee Curtis, her mother Janet Leigh, Adrienne Bordeaux. Oh my God, I can't say her name. Tom Atkins, Buck Flower. I love Buck Flowers. The location is Antonio Bay. The subgenre is ghosts in the fog. The tagline reads, "Lock your doors, bolt your windows. There's something in the fog." I love this movie. It, much like The Shining, is atmosphere of the movie. Does it make sense? I don't know. Do I care? Nah. It's beautiful looking. It must have been so hard to make with all the fog they had to mess around with. The ghosts look, well, yeah, the pirate ghosts look nasty and gnarly, thanks to Rob Bottin. It's a wild, wild movie. I know the remake is crapped on, but I do appreciate the remake for trying to make the plot make a little more sense than the first movie. But honestly, dude, John Carpenter makes movies that don't need to make sense. We're unhinged here. We don't need logic. Who is she? Moving on to Prom Night, directed by Paul Lynch, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Leslie Nielsen, of all people, and many others that I'll just be honest, I don't really know. It is a slasher film with great disco music, which I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but I promise it's there. The tagline reads, "If you're not back by midnight, you won't be coming home." Do many people come home before midnight on prom night? I feel like usually that's the night where curfew is extended, but I'm not sure. I don't remember. I'm very old. Prom Night is not my favorite 80s slasher, if I'm being honest, but it definitely is a beloved film from this decade and this genre. Jamie Lee Curtis looks fierce in this movie. I don't know. I mean, I would recommend it, but this is a movie that I've watched once and I was just, okay, eh. But I'm definitely the outlier. Most people love this movie. Moving on to Terror Train, directed by Roger, oh my God, Spottiswoode. Didn't pronounce that right. He directed Turner and Hooch, which I love. It's starring Jamie Lee Curtis and with an appearance by David Copperfield. And can I just say, David Copperfield could get it? Like, I didn't realize he was that good looking. It's another slasher film. The tagline reads, "The boys and girls of Sigma Pi, some will live, some will die." That's really bad. I'd like to give a shout out to the train conductor, Karn, who's just the best. Like, if anyone deserved to live throughout a horror film, like to make it out alive, it was him. I loved that guy. He was fantastic. This movie, is it good? I don't know. Would I watch it again? Heck yeah. Who doesn't? Prom Night and Terror Train are the same kind of setup, wherein you have some people who played a trick on someone, it went horribly wrong, and then that person decides to get revenge on them. I mean, Friday the 13th is kind of a similar setup as well. This is a really popular setup for this decade, actually. People playing a prank on someone, and then either that person or that person's loved ones getting revenge on them. It's very much a tried and true plot of the horror genre. Lesson here, folks, is don't be playing practical jokes on people. You might get got. You might get got. Okay, now I guess we will move on to the more serious films. And by serious, I mean what I'm dubbing the New York City gritty films. This is like gross New York City back in the day, right? I'll start with Dress to Kill, which is written and directed by Brian De Palma, starring Michael Caine. I'm not gonna do the thing. I'm not doing it. I'm not. Michael Caine, that's his name. I'm not trying it. Nancy Allen, Keith Gordon, many, many others. The subgenre, I'm going to call it transphobic slasher, wanting to be a Hitchcock giallo film. It's Brian De Palma, so it looks fantastic. You know, you have a cast of phenomenal actors. However, I do think ultimately, if you love the film, I'm not saying you're wrong. You are absolutely not wrong. It is a well-made movie. However, the context of the film is very, I mean, it's incredibly regressive. Um, and it's something, you know, I watched. I didn't like it. It sat very uncomfortable with me. So it was just a one and done for me. I don't really have any desire to ever see this film again. And the same goes for the next film I'm talking about, which is Windows. Um, it's directed by Gordon Willis, who is a very well-known DP. He did the director of photography for The Godfather, All the President's Men, Annie Hall. Like, he's a very prestigious director of photography. The film starring Talia Shire and Elizabeth Ashley, who, if you don't know her, you may or may not recognize her as the therapist seen in the infamous movie wherein Nicolas Cage starts screaming the alphabet, which is a 1988 film, Vampire's Kiss, which is my favorite Nick Cage film. The subgenre, I'm going to call this homophobic, lesbian, stalker thriller. There are quite a few of these. The tagline reads, "There is no privacy, there is no safety. The terror will follow you home." And it's about a woman who is obsessed with another woman and goes so far as to pay to have someone really brutally assault her, and then proceeds to like stalk and threaten her. It's really intense and ultimately, much like Dress to Kill, it's very regressive. I didn't like the film really at all. Uh, it's shot beautifully. I mean, Gordon Willis is very, very talented. It looks beautiful. Sadly, this is the only movie I think that he made. I wish he had made others that were maybe something else to write home about. So these are just movies that, you know, if you like them, I'm not knocking it, but I just personally did not. Moving on to Maniac, directed by directed by William Lustig, who also directed Maniac Cop, a movie that's much more fun. Lots of maniacs. This man was obsessed with maniacs. It's starring Joe Spinell. We're going to talk about him a lot because he's in like 3 movies this year. The makeup was by Tom Savini and Rob Bottin. This makeup, Tom Savini, I believe, plays the actor as well as did the makeup for a phenomenal head explosion scene. I mean, I personally think this is better than Scanners. It's real impressive. The subgenre, I call it New York sleazy exploitation slasher. The tagline reads, "I warned you not to go out tonight." I, you know, watched a lot of slashers, man. This is a pretty grimy one. Wasn't my favorite. I mean, Joe Chanel's talented. I think this is a good one, but I just personally didn't like it. You know, I prefer the more weird ones. This is a pretty straightforward, gross out one. I think they were trying to make, you know, statements about like mental health. This person was clearly unwell and killing people, but you know, clearly going through a mental breakdown. Which I don't think that's wrong to depict it like that, but you know, it's really gross. It's not as bad. Oh man, I can't remember the one with, it's almost the exact same movie, but the guy has a driller on the cover. I think it's just called Driller Killer. That, you know, it's not quite as bad as that one, but still it is called Driller Killer. I think it was 1978 or 1979. It is, I think that one's a lot more exploitative than this one, but you know, it's just these kind of more serious ones just aren't really for me. With that having been said, the next movie I want to talk about is Cruising, which was written and directed by William Friedkin. You know, the Exorcist guy. It's starring Al Pacino, of all people, Paul Sorvino, Joe Spinell, Ed O'Neill, William Russ, Mike Starr, so many people you recognize. I guess Karen Allen's technically kind of in it too. The subgenre, I'm calling it wants to be giallo, but it's just a leather slasher. The tagline is Al Pacino is cruising for a killer. I mean, I could talk about this movie for hours. I watched it twice because I needed to see it again because like there was so much I know I missed. I'm ready to watch it a third time in the span of like 2 weeks. Like, it's definitely movie. Like, if you don't like it, totally get it. 100%, no explanation needed. I I think I loved it. Definitely something I'm planning on watching again. I personally would recommend it. I think it's a rare case of a movie that, when it was made, I could definitely understand why people would have had a problem with it, because it's Al Pacino going into, once again, gritty New York time, guys. It's 1980. It is a different time in New York. So he's an undercover cop going into leather bars and to stop a killer who's killing gay men. And I think that at the time, yeah, it was really not right, to make it. And there was violence in the aftermath of this, which is really, really sad. And I don't blame people who protested it, totally get it. But on the flip side, it's a movie that I grew up in, like, Stranger Danger era, and with, public education, my sad public education did teach me about STDs and all that. So watching it from my mindset, 40 years later, I could definitely see this being a lot less actually regressive than it was when it was made. And I can't think of a lot of movies where I'm like, when it was made, it was bad, but now it's like not as bad. I don't know, but yeah, absolutely loved it. I do think Al Pacino, oddly enough, did like a pretty good job, but the film itself is pretty incomprehensible. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and spoil this. Um, William Friedkin decided to have, because there were multiple killers at the time, he kept having different people be the killer, and so it makes it really, really confusing, and it's just not simply not possible to follow the film. But like, I still enjoy the performances and the idea, although it still is portraying like queer people in not the best light. I still like the movie. It's okay to like movies that aren't great. You know what I mean? Next up, I have The Ninth Configuration. Oh my god, if you can find The Ninth Configuration, please effing watch it. I'm gonna go ahead and say right now, this is my favorite movie on this list. Although, I don't actually think I would consider it a horror movie, like, at all, but there's a reason that it probably is considered a horror movie. It was written and directed by William Blatty, who is the writer of The Exorcist, and he directed one other movie 10 years later. In 1990, he directed Legion, aka Exorcist 3. So that's considered his faith trilogy. So it's The Exorcist, The Ninth Configuration, and Legion. I actually like The Ninth Configuration the most out of those three films, which is weird. This movie has a effing stacked cast. Stacy Keach, Scott Wilson, Jason Miller, Ed Flanders, Robert Loggia, Joe Spinell again, Tom Atkins, young Tom Atkins, like pre-mustachioed Tom Atkins. The cover is an astronaut on the moon looking at a man who's crucified, and that actually really sums up the movie perfectly. So if you remember in The Exorcist, there's a scene where Reagan comes downstairs during a party, and there's a astronaut there, and she tells him, "You're gonna die up there," and then begins to urinate. So this actually picks up with that astronaut who is now institutionalized, and the psychiatrist who's treating him. For the subgenre, I would consider this existential dread. The tagline reads, "How do you fight a war called madness?" That's actually perfectly fitting along with the poster of the astronaut and the crucified man. So the crucified man, when you actually watch the film, you learn that that is the psychiatrist, and obviously the astronaut's the astronaut. So it's essentially looking at, in a pre-PTSD world, back when, I'm pretty sure that was still called shell shock, or it was when the books were written anyway. I guess they were trying to look at, how do you cure someone who's been driven insane from having to look at man's cruelest invention, war. So the movie essentially posits, by showing them kindness, man's true best gift, which obviously that's not really true. It's not how mental illness works, but I think the idea is really very sweet and genuine, and the movie ultimately is a very sincere one, and there's not a lot of movies like that. It's definitely a bonkers film. Like it's wild. The stacked cast is giving a performance. Um, it's it is so well written. It's so witty. Sorry, I had to get a drink of water. It's like nothing I've ever seen before, and I've already watched it 2 times. I'm absolutely ready to watch it a third time. Phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal film. A little hard to find. I think there's quite a few edits, just like Legion. Some directors just can't get Final Cut. But yeah, phenomenal film. Then we're gonna have The Changeling, directed by Peter Medic, starring George C. Scott, who was in Legion. Subgenre of ghosts. Tagline reads, "Whatever you do, don't go in the attic." I think this is a really great ghost film. There's not a lot of ghost films in the 80s. Kind of hit and miss in the 70s. Horror does this weird thing where it kind of runs in cycles as it pertains to its subgenres. So when like slashers get big, and then when they start to run their course, then maybe monster movies get big again, or ghost movies get big again, or torture porn gets. So and every so often, when one subgenre is kind of starting to run it, be at the end of its boom cycle, then another one comes up. So horror kind of always feels really, really fresh and inventive when really we're just watching, the waning and waxing of the different subgenres, which I think is very, very cool. For The Changeling, George C. Scott is a great actor. It's a sad movie. I mean, it's about a ghost, so of course, someone's died. It's sad. I think it's very effective. There's a scene with a ball, like a red bouncy ball. Chilling. Chilling. Phenomenal film. Okay, then we're getting to Altered States, directed by Ken Russell, who had also done like Lair of the White Worm, Gothic, Tommy. Tommy's a freaky movie. You seen Tommy? Terrifying. The makeup was by Dick Smith and Rick Baker. It's starring William Hunt and many others. Subgenre, I have no idea. Man versus science, maybe? The tagline reads, "When he heard his cry for help, it wasn't human." It's a movie about some scientists going into a sensory deprivation tank to kind of unlock man's hidden potential or something like that. Um, I feel like I've seen this. It's a well-made film, but it's very serious, and that's just not personally my vibe. It is wild. I would totally recommend like at least one watch of it for sure. It's just not something I loved. I found it boring, not my favorite thing in the world. It is what it is. Alligator, directed by Louis T. Subgenre monster movie. The tagline reads, "It lives 50 feet beneath the city. It's 36 feet long. It weighs 2,000 pounds, and it's about to break out." So it's that urban legend that in New York City there are alligators living under the sewers. I guess they ate the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something. I I thought that was true. I didn't realize that was an urban legend when I saw this movie as a kid. I thought that was a legit thing, that there were alligators in the sewer systems. I'm to this There's a scene where the alligator is in a pool and eats a little boy. To this day, I always have to look behind me to make sure there's not an alligator in a pool, which is ridiculous, but like that's how much this movie scared me. Is it scary? No. Is it fun? Yes. This movie is super fun. I love monster movies. I love giant animal movies. I adore Alligator. I enjoyed the sequel as well. Something about an alligator in New York City sewer system. I don't know, man. It gets me. It's a good story. I'm here for it. I also like Lake Placid, It's just fun. Alligators are just fun. They make good movies. Crawl. Okay. Without Warning was directed by Graydon Clark, who also directed The Uninvited. The cinematography was by Dean Cundy, so it looks good. It's starring Jack Palance, Martin Landau. Both of those actors were in Alone in the Dark together with Donald Pleasance. The subgenre would be aliens in the woods, I guess. The tagline reads, "It preys on human fear. It feeds on human flesh." I thought the actor who played Greg was an absolute cutie who deserved better. The only issue I have with the movie is that, like, Jack Palance, Martin Landau, there's another old man. There's like 3 old men in this movie, and they all kind of look the same and have the same characters, so it gets a little confusing. The moral of the movie is PTSD is a hell of a drug. I was it a great movie? No, but I thought that it really, really worked. The acting sold me on the ridiculousness of it, which that's really all I need. If I really feel like this actor is selling me on them being in peril of being sad, then to me the movie works. Next we have The Children, directed by Max Kalmanowitz, who also directed Dreams Come True. The composer was Harry Manfredini, so the score slaps. Subgenre, nuclear waste zombie kids. It's not a trauma movie, so don't worry. The tagline reads, "Thank God there's somebody else's." It's a movie about people killing some zombie kids. I had a damn fun time with it too. It's depressing, but you know what? It's entertaining. Super entertaining. Fade to Black, written and directed by Vernon Zimmerman, starring Dennis Christopher, who you may or may not recognize from the It miniseries. He played Eddie, the adult version. The subgenre is slasher? Question mark. Tagline reads, "Eric Binford lives for the movies. Sometimes he kills for them too." So this movie has a really heavy commentary on violence in films affecting mentally ill people while simultaneously paying homage to like the old movie monsters, and creates this really kind of cool bridge for horror movies from the past of like where we've come from in terms of like Universal monster movies up to and going towards slasher films that I think was executed perfectly? No, but it's done well enough to I totally recommend this movie. The makeup is really great. I didn't write down who did it. I'm sorry. The acting is really great. It's just ultimately a really sad movie, I think. And I thought it did a pretty good job saying what it wanted to say. Okay, then we get to The Boogeyman, which was directed by Uli Lamel, starring Susanna Love, Nicholas Love, I'm pretty sure there was a relation, John Carradine, and many, many more. Subgenre, nightmare ghost? Question mark. Tagline reads, "The most terrifying nightmare of childhood is about to return." This is basically an Amityville horror movie. If you're familiar with like Amityville, It's About Time, or Dollhouse, or any of the ones where like parts of the house, people like buy parts of the house and take them home, and then those are haunted as well. It's that. They get a haunted mirror. That's the movie. um, it's not great, and yet I don't know. I'd watch it again. It's not bad. I really like the character of Willie, who I know isn't supposed to be an autistic icon, but that's how I chose to read him. The movie was fun. I like a good haunted mirror movie. A lot of people stepping on glass in this movie. That's stressful. That's a horror movie. Oh man, could you imagine if they had a horror movie about people stepping on Lego pieces? Bro, horrifying. Okay, then we can move on to Death Ship, directed by Alvin Rankoff, subgenre Nazi ghost ship. Tagline reads, "Those who survive the ghost ship are better off dead." I'm going back to my subgenre of Nazi ghost ship, but that's pretty much the movie. People board a ghost ship. It's pretty much the same as the movie Ghost Ship. People board a ghost ship. This one happens to be a Nazi ghost ship. I don't recommend this one. You can live without it. It's nothing good or fun. Then we have Humanoids from the Deep, directed by Barbara Peters, with the essay reshoots by Jimmy T. Murakami. But hey, we finally get our first female director with some weird behind the scenes stories because of Roger Corman. Oh, Corman. The makeup was Rob Bottin, and just like in the other movie that he helped with this year, The Fog, these underwater monsters look great. He's very good at seaweed monsters. Shout out to Rob Bottin. Subgenres, it's a monster movie. It's humanoids from the deep, kind of says what it needs to. Tagline reads, "From the ocean depths they strike to terrorize, to make and to mate with a T rather, and to kill." It's a solid monster movie. Honestly, it's way better than it should be while still being Corman levels of trashy, though not yet trauma levels. Corman, guys, Corman. There's stepping stones. There is a message in here about like bigotry. And so the film has some like really kind of deep themes. I liked it, although it's still very misogynist. So there you go. There's that. Next, we have Blood Beach, directed by Jeffrey Bloom. Subgenre would be Jaws ripoff. The tagline reads, "Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, you can't get to it." It's fun. It's not a good movie, but it's fun. I was entertained, and that's all I want to be. Would I watch it again? Maybe in a couple years when I'm bored, just want to throw on something and not pay a lot of attention to it. It was good enough, it's good enough. The Unseen, directed by Danny Steinman, who directed Friday the 13th Part 5 and Savage Streets, starring Sidney Lasik. You'd probably know him from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Subgenre is incest slasher disappointments room. I think that says all you need to know about the movie. The tagline reads, "The ultimate hidden terror." It's just trashy, gross out movie. I don't recommend it. I don't really like movies like this. They give me the Wiggins. There's something about, weird backwoods incesty family, and it's just not, I don't know. I don't like it. It's very assaulty, ick. It's just ick. Next, we have Funeral Homes, also known as Cries in the Night. I don't know if it's more known as Funeral Home or Cries in the Nights. I found it under Funeral Home. It's directed by William Fruit. Subgenre psycho ripoff. Tagline reads, "They were warned. They were all warned. Don't go down to the cellar." The characters are set up oddly well despite the terrible dialogue, and I don't know if it was just how I was watching it, but the transfer was terrible. So I don't know if there's been like a better quality version put out there. But it was very, very, very bad, very poor. um the ending is straight out of Psycho, but done in a way that I thought was actually much kinder, wherein the clearly mentally ill person was treated really well and very kindly, and you don't see that all the time. So it ended up being kind of surprising. It's not a well-made movie at all. It's very boring, but like I think the script was really, really well executed. And so if you're someone who doesn't mind super low budget, I would say worth the watch. If someone that would bother you, I would say, maybe pass on that one. Next, we're going to have Motel Hell, which, my God, this poster is too apt. It's directed by Kevin Connor, starring Rory Calhoun, amongst others. The subgenre is cannibal slasher farm horror. The tagline reads, "It takes all kinds of critters to make Farmer Vincent fritters." Yeah, oh my God. Nothing really could have prepared me. A spoiler. Nothing could have it's spoiler if you want to avoid it, maybe skip 15 seconds. Nothing could have prepared me for Rory Calhoun coming out of the back room in a severed pig's head while wielding a chainsaw. Nothing. This is a gross movie. It really freaked me out. Like, it unnerved me, but I would watch it again. I would absolutely watch this again, unlike a lot of other movies that I didn't particularly like. Then we're gonna go ahead and move on to Children of the Full Moon. This is a TV movie, which I count as a movie. It's a Hammer Film Productions, which is one of the main reasons that I included it. I'm a big fan of Hammer, which was kind of dying out by the 80s. I don't remember when specifically it officially closed its door, but it was really much more of a boom studio in like the 50s and 60s. If you don't know, Hammer is a British studio, really well known for, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing's monster films. Children of the Full Moon was directed by Tom Clegg. It's a werewolf cult movie. I'm gonna go ahead and spoil it. My review is that werewolf going to that woman to create a pack of werewolf pups? Oh yes, that is what's happening. Okay. Is it a good movie? No. Do I recommend it? No. It's fine. Watchable. It's watchable. We're gonna move on to one of my favorite subgenres, rocksploitation. And this year, our rocksploitation film is Terror on Tour. It's directed by Don Edmonds. The music was by The Names, who I believe also portrayed the band in the film. The subgenre is rocksploitation, as I said. The tagline reads, Terror strikes as the music begins. But I got some questions. Was the terror on tour? Because the band sure wasn't. They were in one place the whole movie. Everyone's wearing the same makeup, so when you reveal who the killer is, I can't tell you who the killer is because I literally don't know. It could be one of three people. I don't know because they all look exactly the same and they wear the same makeup. I couldn't tell who the killer was. And it ends on this I'm just gonna go and spoil the movie. I don't recommend it. Once again, I don't know if it's just where I watched it, but the quality was very, very bad. I don't know if there's a better resolution or like higher version restoration out there, but what I watched was terrible. It ends on like a freeze frame of the killer screaming. I'm not even sure what he's screaming. I think he's screaming stop. It's just, it looks like they all look like it's like Kiss makeup, I guess. It's like full makeup with these bad wigs. The movie just sucks. It's just simply not good. And I look forward to talk about better rocksploitation movies as the decade progresses. Now we get to holiday horror. Oh gosh, I love holiday horror. So Terror on Train, which I already talked about, is a New Year's movie. And Friday the 13th takes place on Friday the 13th. I don't know if you count that as a holiday, but I'm going to. So those are included. And then after that, we can go ahead and talk about Mother's Day, which is directed by Charles Kaufman. Subgenre, I'm going to go ahead and say hillbilly family, hillbilly incest family. Tagline reads, if you go down into the woods today, ellipses. Doesn't say anything else. So I don't know what happens if you go down into the woods today. Guess I'll have to watch the movie to find out. And I did. And it's deeply and profoundly unfun. It is devoid of entertainment value to me. I truly disliked this movie from beginning to end. This is the movie I would say is my I absolutely don't recommend it. It's on the bottom of my list for this year. Hated every moment of it. No. Very assaulty, very gross, needlessly so. Trauma is more tasteful. Trauma. Next, New Year's Evil. I love the name. Directed by Emmett Alston, produced by Cannon. I love a Cannon movie. Subgenre is holiday horror slasher. The tagline reads, don't dare make New Year's resolutions unless you plan to live. I like the movie. The music is fine. The costumes are fantastic. It's a little kind of misogynist, but honestly, it's fine. Totally worth the watch. I enjoyed it. It's very it's very fun, I think. Then we go to Christmas Evil. Also really like that title. I guess if you have Eve, it just makes sense to go to Evil. Directed and written by Lewis Jackson. Subgenre holiday horror slasher. Once again, tagline reads, "Better watch out, better not cry, or you'll die." It's about a guy who wants to be Santa Claus and starts killing naughty kids. Or was it all a dream? Who knows? Who's to say? Gotta watch the movie to find out. and he'll know if you don't. I really like the movie. I would definitely recommend it. Next, another Christmas horror film, which is a lot like Prom Night. It is directed by David Hess, makeup by Mark Strom. I never know if I'm saying his name right. Subgenre holiday horror, sorority horror, slasher. Tagline reads, "You'll scream till dawn." So it kind of combines Black Christmas and Prom Night, but in a way that makes them very boring. I would definitely recommend Black Christmas and Prom Night before Twelve Good Night. It's a sorority plays a trick on someone and then someone gets revenge. It's fine. I did think the mask, they wear this like creepy, almost kind of clear mask. It's weird looking. That was cool. That's about all I gotta say about that. Next, we can talk about Hex. Ooh, I love Hex. Directed by I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I'm gonna say Koi Chi Hung, who also directed The Boxer's Omen. It's a Shaw Brothers production, a Hong Kong film. I deeply enjoy Hong Kong horror movies. They're just so fun. The subgenre mystical. That's the subgenre. It's mystical. It starts out as like Shaw Brothers doing their version of Diabolique from 1955. Then it kind of turns into a ghost vampire revenge story, I think. The version I found did not have very good subtitles. Like it clearly wasn't um was the interpretation was not there. It was lacking. It was bad. So I really need to find like a better version of this film, but I would totally 100% recommend watching this. It's right after Ninth Configuration. It's my second favorite film from this year. So good. And then our last 5 movies are going to be our Italian horror films, because we have a lot, and we have from our big Italian horror directors. Okay, so first, I mean, we have to talk about Cannibal Holocaust, the OG found movie, question mark. It was directed by Ruggero Dodego. Ruggero Dudado? I don't know how to say his name. I should have looked that up. The subgenre is found footage and racism. The tagline reads, "Can a movie go too far?" This movie has so many crazy stories surrounding it. It is the video nasty, right? It's tremendously icky. I don't like the animal violence in it. I remember the music in it, oddly. I didn't write down who did like the score. Did someone do the score? Or did they just get like music for it? I don't know. But it's I think there was a time in history, and to be honest, there's still people who think that. Like there's this idea of like white people go into the woods and get eaten by darker skinned people, which is very racist. This movie didn't start that. It's been a thing, but it kind of capitalized on that. A lot of Italian horror directors do stuff like that. Italy, are you okay? Why are you so afraid of why are you so afraid of the woods? What's going on? I don't know the geography of Italy, or like the demographic breakdown. But a little weird. Anyway, it's one of those movies that if you're talking about horror movies, it's one that gets brought up, and if you've never seen it, I would recommend, if you're a fan of horror movies, that that's something that you watch. However, I don't know if it's a good movie. Like I have no way to like say good or bad. It's just one that you watch. It's just as a horror fan, that's just a movie you simply gotta see. Then I'm gonna go to Night of the Zombies, which I think has an alternate name, but I forgot what it is. It's directed by Bruno Mattei, who's done like Cruel Jaws, Rats, Shocking Dark. It's a zombie film. Oddly enough, could you tell by the title, Night of the Zombies, that it's a zombie movie? Do you think it's a zombie movie? I think it's a zombie movie. The tagline reads, "When the creeping dead devour the living flesh." It's like white people going out to an area and getting attacked by like darker skinned people. It's like, oh guys, what are you doing? You need to stop. You need to stop this. It's not cute. Although I think in this film, I think the zombies was started by like a science experiment gone wrong. So it could be Man v Science too, in terms of subgenre. But there's a lot of this I've seen in Italian horror movies, especially for Italian zombie movies, wherein they'll have the slowest effing walking zombies, and a woman will stand there and scream for 15 solid seconds as the zombie slowly approaches and begins to eat her. It's like, girl, you had ample time to slowly walk away and get away from the zombie. You had so many options. So many options. I don't know, it bothers me on a deep-seated fundamental level. It's just so annoying. It's really similar to the if anyone gets this reference, applause to you, but at the beginning of Paranorman, that IKEA film, they make fun of it, and I just have so much love in my heart for them for doing that. Next we have City of the Living Dead, which is directed by Lucio Fulci. I mean, my God, he directed The Beyond, House by the Cemetery, New York Ripper, Zombie, Black Cat, so many others. Subgenre, girl, it's a Fulci film. The tagline reads, "The dead shall rise and walk the earth." I'm gonna be honest, all these Fulci films blend in. I don't even remember. I keep watching these Italian horror films and I just don't like them. I'm not a fan of Fulci. I'm not a fan of Argento. Bava, both Lamberto and Mario I can F around with, but I just really don't like Fulci. I can't remember the difference between City of the Living Dead and House by the Cemetery and The Beyond. That's not true. The Beyond's about the pretty chick with the seeing eye dog. But that's it. Man, I don't remember. I really don't remember. I just if you like Italian horror, totally watch it. But if you're like me and it's like, I don't know, man, this movie's just great soundtrack, boring movie. Moving on to Inferno, which is written and directed by Dario Argento, who's done like Suspiria, Tenebrae, Deep Red, Opera, Phenomena. Subgenre, I really couldn't tell you at all what this movie's about. Um, on my review, I wrote, "What is this movie about?" I didn't even remember I wrote that. But there's this woman in it who might be the most beautiful human being I've ever seen in my entire life, and that's all I remember. And she's just randomly sitting in the class holding a cat. I don't understand what was happening in this film, and I just didn't particularly enjoy it. Again, if you like Italian horror, go off. Oh man, I don't didn't like it. Lastly, we have Macabre, directed by Lamberto Bava, who's done like Demons and A Blade in the Dark. Subgenre, I have no idea what subgenre this is. Children are evil, and when you lose your spouse, you go a little crazy, I guess. Uh, yeah, tagline, prepare yourself for the shock of a lifetime. Once she kept a lover on the side, but that's nothing compared to what she's keeping in the freezer. I actually like this one, which is a first for me. I did think Robert deserved better. I even think Jane deserved better. Their life lesson here is pay more attention to your kids. So basically, what happens is this woman was having an affair, and while she was having an affair, her son dies. So she ends up getting a divorce from her husband and moving into her lover's old apartment. And her landlord is a visually impaired man named Robert who's infatuated with her. And I'm going to go ahead and spoil the part because it's real obvious. Like, what she's keeping in the freezer is part of the dead body of her lover. And that's not the plot of the movie, though. Like, that's just an aspect that's happening in the film. That's not the actual plot. So I'm not really giving that much away by saying it, which is crazy. The movie is wild. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. I liked it. I love Robert. I felt bad for almost everyone in the movie. And kids are evil. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right. That concludes my review of those those movies. I hope you had a fun time. If you listen to this whole thing, wow, thanks. Feel free to recommend any movies. If you want me to do a deep dive into any of these movies, happy to do so. Yes. So I think you can comment if you're listening on Spotify or I think that's the only place. Spotify or YouTube, I can definitely see your comments. I honestly don't know how to see if I have a comment on Apple Pod, but if you do, I'm sorry if I don't respond to it. It's not because I don't like you, it's just because I don't understand how Apple Pod works. Um, yeah, so you can find me at the Unhinged Binge on Instagram. You can find me at Legoland13 on YouTube and on Letterboxd. I hope I probably left a link to my blog, which just kind of talks about all these movies. I will be doing all of the 1980s. If anyone, again, has a specific movie you'd like me to talk about, 100% just recommend it. I'll try to get to it. So, yeah, have a great, great day. Also, shout out to my very, very good friend, Rob Fishbeck, for doing the music for me. You can find him on Rob Fishbeck Network on YouTube. I also believe he has a Instagram and I think a Twitter. I'm not calling it X. Yeah, okay. So thanks again for listening and have a great, great day. Bye.